So in the poetry booklet that I had to write for my teacher, Mr. Thaden, at Phillips Junior High School in 1981, when I was 12 years old, was an assignment that, of course, I did the night before because it was due. And then I kind of rushed through it, but there were a couple poems that stood out to me, and one in particular was this one that I can't remember the second stanza right now, but the first stanza says, "The world is big, the world is round, the world is quiet, it makes no sound." And we were required to draw a picture with each poem, and in that picture I drew a picture of the earth floating in space, and then a big ear next to the earth listening. And when I look back on that today, I find it really interesting that I had this kind of cosmological perspective and looking at the earth from space, which I was born in 1969. And so it's always been this thing for me to know that I was part of the first generation to really experience what the earth looks like from space, right? I mean, this was a major moment in history when humans took themselves out of the immediate biosphere and looked back at the earth from space and were able to see, block it out with their thumb, as scientists would say. And the second poem that stood out to me from that piece is that there's I remember the two different stanzas, and it says, "Nothing is nothing, it can't be nothing, it won't be nothing because it's nothing. Nothing is wrong, nothing is right, it can't be wrong, it can't be right." And the second piece, the second stanza doesn't really, it's sort of like, I remember what the term was again when I learned about this, cultural relativism or something to that effect, moral relativism, right? Like that second one kind of means that, but it doesn't speak to me in the same way as the concept of nothing is nothing. It can't be nothing. It won't be nothing because it is nothing. Is nothing. Is means to be. Nothing is still something, right? So this philosophical thing, as a 12-year-old, there's this thing where I look back at that and go, that's really interesting. And you find this kind of thinking in Buddhism a lot. They talk about nothingness in Buddhism all the time, but the fact of to be, isness, like Meister Eckhart says, isness needs no justification. And when you can hold this bigger view, of things where isness and nothingness are held together in a greater context, right? It's sort of a radical breakthrough in thought, right? I mean, this is sort of, philosophers have been doing this forever and sort of pushing the extremes of thought on the world of opposites that we've created of humans. And you see this written in sacred text. It's the Tao Te Ching gets into that in the first, the name that can be named is not the constant name. Naming is the mother of the 10,000 things. That's the first, something along that's the first line of the Tao Te Ching. It's reflecting on the sort of this idea of this and that, right? The isness and nothingness, right? The world of opposites, right? When you read the story of the Garden of Eden, and Adam eats the fruit of knowledge and becomes aware of the world of opposites, right? That's basically what Adam's job is, to name the world. Language, thinking, how this stuff is fascinating. But to get back to the concept of nothing is nothing, it cannot be nothing, right? Nothing is nothing. It can't be nothing. It won't be nothing because it is nothing. Nothing is still something, right? So, to see that and look at it years later, that you wrote that in a rush, that and the picture of the earth from space, and thinking about the silent earth floating in the middle of space, is this powerful thing that obviously has been something that's been woven into my thinking from even before I wrote that when I was 12. And I have sort of other early life experiences where I was kind of getting philosophical in conversations with my cousin up in the middle of the night about the universe, and this, and challenging thinking around, concepts of God even as a child. With my mother, I wrote another piece about this in another essay, but I reflected on the fact that one time I was driving with my mother. She picked me up from kindergarten, and I was at a Catholic school, and somewhere along the line I kind of became aware of this controversy between sort of creationism and evolution. And I just remember kind of struggling with this concept. And I was driving, I was 5 years old, looking at my mother driving down the road going back to our house, and I said, "Mommy, where did the universe come from?" And she said, "Well, Stevie, God created the universe." So we kept driving for a second, and I sat there and thought, and while I was in the passenger seat, and then I said, "Well, if God created the universe, then how was God created?" And then my mother just completely started hysterically laughing, while she's driving, essentially crying as she's laughing, wiping tears on her face, driving down the road. And as I'm sitting here watching her laugh so hard, it was very clear to me that she fed me a line just because she's trying to answer a question for a 5-year-old who's asking this deep question. And when I called out the ridiculousness of this concept, which is nothing and isness and nothingness as well, it's one of these things that I realized my mother does not have that answer, right? So this was like the beginning of my cosmological quest, right? I eventually started finding resources and finding my way to the world of Thomas Berry and that thinking and Brian Swim. And then when I discovered that, it basically brought back that initial philosophical, cosmological urge to understand and to answer that question, or at least to understand the mystery in a deeper way, to be comfortable enough to sit in the mystery of the fact that no one knows and has an answer to that great question. And that's a good place to be. And we need our young people to be in that place and be educated from that place of understanding the mystery, right? The mystery is everything. Awe is the beginning of wisdom, as Rabbi Abraham Heschel said. We need to set our children up to know that's a burning star, not just call it the sun and call it a day. That's a burning star right there. It's on my face right now. I can feel the heat of a burning sun from 90 million miles away right now. Our children need to know that, and they don't. We don't teach them that. So that's one of the goals.